For all. Prayer this morning will be offered by the gentleman from Wycomico County.
Thank you, Speaker. Good morning, family. All right, not bad. Everybody's awake. Okay. If you would please bow your heads just for a moment. Almighty God, we come before you grateful and blessed to have the opportunity to serve our neighbors. Help us all to be mindful of who sent us to Annapolis, either elected or selected, and take us home safe and sound with good news for our family and friends, and bring us, those who wish to return, back again next year to do it all over again. Amen.
Quorum call.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their presence? If so, the clerk will take the call. There being 98 members present, the House is now in session. Clerk, read the journal from the previous day.
Annapolis, Maryland, March the 17th, 2022.
Recognizing the Deputy Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So much be considered the reading of the journal.
So ordered, petitions, memorials, and other papers. Quorum call.
Madam Speaker.
Clerk will take the call. There being 98 members present, the House is still in session. Calendar of third reading, Senate bills number 5. The clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 290, Budget Bill, Fiscal Year 2023.
Is on third reading and final passage.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Washington County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I do have an amendment at the desk. It's amendment number 403620/1.
Amendment number 1.
So each year, the CDC requests abortion data from the central health agencies for the 50 states, the District of Columbia, and New York City. In 2019, the latest year available, 49 reporting areas provided this information to the CDC. The states of California, Maryland, and New Hampshire continue to not report abortion data to the CDC. So this amendment would not expend $100,000 to the Maryland Department of Health until the department has issued a report to the Budget Committee that provides abortion data regarding all abortions performed in the state for calendar year 2022 and not just Medicaid abortions. The amendment asks for certain demographic data on abortions performed in the state and specifically states that report shall not include any personally identifiable information that could be used to identify either the patient or the physician. Funds would revert to the general fund if the report is not provided. I move the amendment.
Recognizing floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members of the House, I would like for you to reject this amendment. We have never provided this data. We have seen this amendment many times in the past. We have always rejected it. There's very good sound reasons why we do not provide the data. First of all, we do not provide medical procedure data to the federal government on any medical procedures that we do in this state. There's no reason why to include this particular medical procedure to single it out, and so I ask you to reject the data. The second reason, which is actually more important, is that the CDC themselves have said that the data they get from the states is inaccurate and incomplete. And they would rather get the data themselves without having the states report it, because they don't believe that providers feel comfortable reporting this information, and therefore the data itself is not accurate. So what is the point of requiring this if the CDC themselves doesn't feel it's accurate data and doesn't want us to do it? So I ask you to reject this amendment. Thank you.
Maker of the motion.
Interesting comments as the CDC continues to ask for data which was alleged is not accurate, and also 49 other jurisdictions continue on an annual basis to provide that data. We heard yesterday on this House floor how important it is to have data, to perform studies. $750,000 in that case yesterday with that bill. Previously on the House floor, we heard the majority party quoting statistics from the CDC in regards to amendments being offered on House Bill 937. So in its 2018 abortion surveillance report, the CDC includes a section titled Public Health Implications. That report states that ongoing surveillance of legal abortions is important for several reasons. These reasons include, and I quote, evaluating programs aimed at preventing unintended pregnancies, as 42% of unintended pregnancies end in abortion. Efforts to help women avoid unintended pregnancies might reduce the number of abortions. And in its 2019 report, the CDC states, and I quote, routine abortion surveillance is needed to assess trends in clinical practice patterns over time. Information in this report on the number of abortions performed through different methods and at different gestational ages provides the denominator data that are necessary for analysis of the relative safety of abortion practices. Finally, information on the number of pregnancies ending in abortion is needed in conjunction with data on births and fetal losses to estimate the number of pregnancies in the United States and determine rates for various outcomes of public health importance. The CDC goes on to say that multiple factors influence the incidence of abortion, including access to health care, contraception, state regulations, acceptance of non-marital childbearing, insufficient client-centered counseling, lack of youth-friendly services, low client awareness, and the economy. This amendment isn't about whether you're pro-life or pro-choice. It's about women's health and the ability to collect data to improve upon that health. It's about having the information necessary to make informed decisions to direct adequate services to the areas where they're needed the most. I press the amendment.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Madam Speaker, thank you. Yes, we collect data when we believe that the data is necessary to guide our policy directives. That does not mean we collect data just to collect data when we feel like it. The CDC gets accurate abortion information not from the states, but from the Guttmacher Institute. 70% of the data that feeds into CDC statistics and reporting does not come from the states. It comes from the Guttmacher Institute, which is a private, nonprofit, nonpartisan think tank that does healthcare policy. So the data that comes from the states is not accurate. The CDC themselves have said that. It makes no sense for us to continue to contribute to a system that the CDC themselves has said is not accurate. Please vote against this amendment. Thank you.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Tillman.
You know, I want to rise in support of this amendment. There's nothing about this amendment that's controversial. The subject is heart-wrenchingly controversial. The amendment gathers information. There's nothing bad about it. There's nothing threatening about it. If anything, it's going to help us understand transparency, facts, reality. We talk about science, the best science. You hear science all the time. But people want to know the facts. This amendment would help in a big way in providing some good factual information, which would help everyone debate this, understand it, and move forward. The amendment is not controversial, and it's a good amendment. I support it, and I hope the body will join me and vote for it. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Gentleman, the maker of the motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The amendment actually requires the Department of Health to report to the budget committees, not to CDC. With that clarification, I press the amendment.
On
Madam
the
Speaker.
amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Roll call.
Madam Speaker,
To explain my vote, Madam Speaker.
Explain your vote. 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I guess we wouldn't want to really report these kind of numbers because since the beginning of Roe versus Wade, over 68 million fetuses have been aborted. 68 million children lost their lives since the beginning of that horrible Supreme Court decision. And what's really interesting, and I'm sure we don't want to know this one either, is how many women were forced to have abortions, whether by their parents or their boyfriends or God only knows. I guess I don't know what it's like to be raped, but I think it would really be horrible to be forced to abort a child that you didn't want to abort and have to carry that for the rest of your life. We pass bills to put phone numbers up to call because of sexual trafficking. Maybe we should put a bill up to have phone numbers in every abortion clinic so people can call and say, I'm being forced to do this. I do not want to do this. This is why we need these numbers. People need to know the truth. And this is a major Holocaust. That's what this is.
Clerk will take the call. The amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments to the bill to its title?
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the Chairwoman of Appropriations.
Thank you very much. You moved very quickly this morning, and I didn't get up first to give this amendment. You have an amendment at the desk. It's 913226/1.
amendment number 1.
Thank you very much. In the Appropriations Committee, we have a policy that says that we do not reconsider actions we've taken or bills that we've passed unless new information comes to us, which we think is credible and that we should take into consideration. And so new information came to us about a $2 million item that we had fenced off for the State Reserve Fund. It was to GoCap for a pilot program dealing with gun safety. But the new information was that it in fact affected one county in the state, Calvert County. Now, we want to be courteous, really courteous to our members from Calvert County. And we want to show them the respect that we want to see for everyone on this floor. So with that, I move the amendment that will strike that $2 million.
On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Okay. The amendment passes. Recognizing gentlelady from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have an amendment at the desk. It is 433322/1.
Amendment number 1.
Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So this is a fairly simple, easy to understand amendment. We offer this amendment every year because, frankly, the stones would cry out if we did not offer this amendment. This amendment says that Medicaid says that taxpayers will not fund abortion After 24 weeks, after viability, as you know, we had lengthy discussion on this issue with the previous bills that have crossed this floor. But this amendment says taxpayers will not fund abortions for mental health reasons. So I'll refresh your memory. Last year, there were 10,163 Medicaid-funded abortions. The number of abortions that would have been covered, if the birth would result in the death of the woman, there were 0 of those. Rape, sex offense, or incest, there were 2. With reasonable degree of certainty, the fetus would have a serious deformity or abnormality, that was 20. Woman's future health, physical health, was 530. So those would still be covered by Medicaid, but what would not be covered by Medicaid is medical evidence that continuation of the pregnancy is creating a serious effect on the woman's mental health. And if carried to term, there's a substantial risk of a serious, long-lasting effect on the woman's future mental health. This is a mental health exclusion because we want to talk about the baby, the fetus. And when we debated our last one of the abortion bills, the floor leader stood up and said that it wasn't true that a full-term baby, full-term fetus could be aborted simply because the mental health provision, simply because a woman days before her delivery went to a physician and said, my mental health is in danger, and the physician would sign it, not a mental health professional, simply the physician performing the abortion would sign that, and then the baby would be aborted. So this would stop taxpayer funding of that, and indeed, I have an Attorney General's opinion to let you know that that is indeed the truth, because the law, quote unquote, from Kathy Rowe, quote, the law does not set any limit on the ability to terminate a pregnancy under the mental health provision. So I think this is reasonable. First of all, I don't think they should happen. This amendment will not stop that from happening, unfortunately, but it will say that our tax dollars should not be paying for that. So with that, Madam Speaker, I move the amendment.
Floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Once again, I ask the body to reject this amendment. We have heard this, as the amendment offer has said, we have heard this every year. And the reason we reject it every year is actually quite simple. Right now, most private health insurance plans cover abortion for any reason, for absolutely any reason. So if you can afford health insurance, you're entitled to an abortion. Under this amendment, if you are poor, you are not. That is the simple case. We have a principle in the state of mental health parity. That means that we treat mental health the same way we treat somatic health, the same way we treat physical health. We treat mental health. Because mental health is an intrinsic part of an individual's health, period. So what we are not going to do is discriminate against the poor and say, if you can afford private health insurance, you can have an abortion, but if you cannot, you can't. I ask the body to reject this amendment. Thank you.
Maker of the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just to be clear, this amendment does not say they cannot have an abortion. I wish that were the case. I wish we were protecting full-term babies in the womb, but we are not. This is simply saying tax dollars will not pay for them. Those of us that believe that this is wrong, our tax dollars should not be used to allow the abortion of a full-term, healthy baby.
Floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The language of the amendment doesn't say that, but the actions of the amendment do. Because if you are poor and you can only get health care through Medicaid, it will prevent you from being able to have the medical care that you need to take care of yourself. Please reject this amendment. Thank you.
On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Oppose?
Roll call.
Roll call.
Madam Speaker,
Clerk will take the call. The amendment fails.
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing gentlelady from Carroll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have an amendment at the desk. Amendment number 233-622-1.
amendment number 1.
Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
This amendment is cutting the funding for the Abortion Care Clinical Training Fund. We discussed this earlier this session. Since that discussion, I've heard from countless citizens across the state, my constituents, all of our constituents, who are very upset that we would be spending additional state taxpayer money to train more abortion physicians in the state of Maryland. As I stated before, I'm very disappointed that we would spend even more taxpayer money in a state that Maryland is considered to be the top 3 of ease of access for abortions. And yet somehow that isn't enough. Our taxpayer money for countless Marylanders to fund more training for something that they find completely unacceptable is wrong. I am disappointed that we would not be spending this money, again, to help mothers with high-risk pregnancies and to help save premature babies and keep them alive for families across the state of Maryland. And so I ask that you vote in favor of this amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Body, I ask that you reject this amendment as well. We had this debate. This is a policy debate. We had this debate on the previous bill. It was rejected, and the bill passed this House. The bill is now in the Senate and awaiting action there one way or the other. This money in the budget is contingent on that bill passing. Whether or not you agree with the legislation, whether or not you agree with this fund, I think we can all agree that if legislation passes, it is incumbent upon us to properly fund legal legislation. That's all that this line item does. It simply says that if that legislation passes, we have a responsibility to provide the funding necessary to enact that legislation. So I ask you all to reject this amendment and let the policy process take its course. Thank you.
Maker of the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I appreciate what the floor leader has stated. However, yes, it is a policy discussion. It's a discussion about what a lot of us feel is wrong. And so while I know it belabors the discussion further, I think that when you're speaking up for your constituents and thousands of Marylanders over something that is funding additional abortions that they find wrong, it's okay to have that discussion more than once. And so I do ask for your favorable vote. Thank you.
On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Oppose?
Roll call.
Roll call.
Madam Speaker,
Clerk will take the call. The amendment fails. Recognizing gentleman from Frederick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good morning. I have an amendment at the desk. The amendment number is 623020.
amendment number 1.
Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
On page 5, this amendment would strike beginning with provided in line 12 through line 21. This section of the budget deals with the $6.4 million to aid individuals seeking counsel with evictions. And the reason I'm putting in this amendment is because the pandemic has impacted Marylanders across the board. We know that. It's surely impacted tenants, but it's also impacted landlords. During the pandemic, there were executive orders, there were provisions put in place that protected tenants. But this is very one-sided, and I'll give you a very specific answer, a specific situation. If you have a landlord that has one property and one tenant, and the rent covers the mortgage, and the tenant refuses or is incapable of paying that rent, the landlord's also impacted. Are we providing counsel to the landlord? So it's important to understand that this impacts everybody. And although we do want to help our most vulnerable in our state, we want to help individuals that have been the most adversely impacted, it's across the board. And I'll leave you with this very specific example. So when I got out of college, I was fortunate enough to buy a one-bedroom condo. I think it was 700 square feet. I lived there for several years. I wanted to get married. I wanted to start a family. We bought a bigger house, but I kept the condo and I rented it out. And I had a tenant that paid me the equivalent of what my mortgage was. And I remember one time my tenant just stopped paying me. Just stopped paying me, and there was nothing I could do about it. I had to wait several months to go through the eviction process. I could only imagine if taxpayers were paying my tenant to seek counsel to further go after me. So with that said, I think this amendment is fair. The millions of dollars is slightly one-sided. I think we could do a better job. For that, Madam Speaker, I push the amendment.
Floor Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, if this debate sounds a little familiar, it's because we did this last year. We talked about evictions and the eviction process and access to counsel for evictions for individuals who, if you've been to housing court, you know that this is a one-sided sort of contest when you're in the court with individuals that are facing eviction. I don't want to continue to debate the policy. We have the law that's in place, but we have not funded it. And so this money is a DLS recommendation, it's a subcommittee recommendation, and it's a committee recommendation that says we should fund individuals that are facing evictions in court. That's it. Let's fund those individuals that are facing eviction and continue to promise that we stated last year we would do and help those individuals. And so for that, I would ask you to reject this amendment.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from St. Mary's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Can the floor leader please rise? Just a question
Floor
on this.
Leader.
Hey, good morning.
Morning.
You said you didn't want to debate the policy on this, which was the eviction moratorium and tenants funding. But I remember last year there was also a funding mechanism for this initiative, for this policy. Did that bill pass?
No, the bill did not pass.
So I guess so the bill didn't pass for the funding mechanism of that. So now we're just taking this money from general funds, is that correct?
That is correct. We are taking the money from the general funds.
Okay, so I think we should debate the policy because the legislation that funded it ultimately didn't pass. Thank you, I appreciate you answering the question. Madam Speaker, I stand to support this amendment. Housing prices have skyrocketed. And what has skyrocketed even faster than housing prices are rent prices. We have yet another bill last year on the floor, and now we're kind of sneaking into the amendment through a budget line item to fund it, that once again penalizes good tenants at the expense of bad tenants. The ultimate people paying for this are the tenants struggling to find a house. And I mean, just last week in delegation, a Southern Maryland delegation, we had a whole forum on affordable housing. Well, if you want to know why housing isn't affordable, think about the legislation that this body has passed the last 3 years, and this is just another piece of it. If you want to know why there's no houses and rental markets in your area, take a good look in the mirror. I stand to support this amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Roll call.
Madam Speaker,
Madam Speaker,
Gentleman from Howard,
to explain my vote, Madam Speaker,
explain your vote. 2 minutes.
I am voting for this amendment because of the pure reason that there are many people who find themselves as landlords, like the good delegate was explaining beforehand, like myself. In 2006, at the height of the market, my wife and I, we recently got married. We bought a duplex in Columbia. It's great. It's where we were going to start our family. And then within 2 months, we actually got orders to go overseas to serve in the military. Now, we're upside down. We're serving in the military overseas, and we actually would have gone into foreclosure if we did not have renters that were renting there. And we were renting at a loss. So I just stand, and I hope that people can vote yes and green on this, because we are helping people by voting green on this amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Clerk will take the call. The amendment fails. Recognizing the minority whip.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have a couple questions for the floor leader about state aid for police protection, if I could.
Floor leader.
Yes, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So the governor, take this off. So the governor had allocated in his original budget, the sum of roughly $46 million, I believe it was, for what he called a refund the police initiative, a proposal I got to tell you, I wholeheartedly support that, which was essentially a 50% increase in the state aid for the police protection program statewide, right?
Yes.
Okay, all right. And under the budget that he submitted, Baltimore City was supposed to get $8 million under that proposal, even though I guess under a deal that was struck way before we got here back in 1991 between Governor Schaefer and Mayor Schmoke, wherein the state took over the operations of the Baltimore City Jail. Baltimore City wasn't supposed to get any more of that SAP funding, right?
If you say so. I wasn't here.
Okay. All right. So let me ask you this question. Now, the Appropriations Committee made some changes, did it not, to that $46 million allocation?
It did.
Okay. Can you tell us what you all did with that?
Sure. What we did is the way that the allocation worked, the Senate actually made the change. Let me start there.
Okay.
We agreed with the Senate and their recommendation. Their recommendation was to make sure that the funds didn't go to crimes, violent, and I believe it was, there was another category that was a part of that. We struck that category and made it more specific to areas of violent crime.
So essentially what you all did was, in conjunction with the Senate, I guess, is that you changed the allocation to, I want to make sure I get the language right, to a proportionate allocation based on total violent crimes reported.
That is correct.
All right. So essentially then, with that change, what does that mean for Baltimore City? Will they get more or less than the $8 million that the governor had allocated, notwithstanding that arrangement that had been entered into back in 1991?
Well, if you think about what we hear on this floor every day about violent crime in Baltimore City, Obviously, that would mean that Baltimore City would get a lot more, not a lot more. Actually, it would receive an extra $7 million on top of what was already allocated.
Okay, so Baltimore City gets an extra $7 million on top of the $8 million that the governor had already allocated. Obviously, that extra $47 million, the share of that is going to go down for everybody else, right?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Floor Leader.
Thank you.
Madam Speaker, I have an amendment at the desk. It is Amendment 113528/1.
Amendment number 1.
Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
All right. So very simply, all this amendment does is restore the refund the police appropriation to that which the governor originally proposed. The city, because of the challenges it has, would still get the extra $8 million, notwithstanding the fact regarding this SAP deal that was entered into back in 1991, to which I alluded a little earlier, because frankly it needs it, plain and simple. But because of the proliferation of crime across the state, not just in the city, we should not be tinkering with the allocation for refunding the police as originally proposed by the governor. In that Goucher poll that I talked about the other day, crime was the top concern among Maryland voters, and that poll just came out on the 14th. And it's a top concern all across the country as crime has proliferated over the last 2 years. And people have now realized that defunding the police didn't work, and they're walking that back. So the President of the United States has said the same thing, as a matter of fact. But let's distribute these resources more equitably, as the governor proposed, to support law enforcement all across the state. Madam Speaker, I move the amendment.
Floor Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, I am going to ask you to reject this amendment. I am not going to get into a debate about refunding or defunding the police, but I am going to talk about something that I think me and my colleagues from Baltimore City hear every day on this floor, and that's the amount of violent crime, how bad things are, how worse it gets every day in Baltimore City. We hear this every day from this floor. And we have an opportunity to target Baltimore City as well as other jurisdictions across the state when it comes to violent crime. But we talk about violent crime in here every day, and you point to Baltimore City. So let's be consistent. If we want to be consistent about saying how bad things are without talking about what we can do to assist, we're not being consistent. This is about making sure that if we want to assist Baltimore City, not continue to talk about Baltimore, but assist Baltimore City in tackling violent crime, then this does make it more equitable. This makes it more equitable for the city of Baltimore, that you talk about every day, and the rest of the jurisdictions that also have violent crime. All the money is not going to Baltimore City. But when you talk about Baltimore City and the amount of crime that's going on, and then you want to say, nope, it's not enough money, too much money. Let's take it back and give it somewhere else. That is not being consistent. Colleagues, please reject this amendment, and let's make this more equitable for the entire state, including the city of Baltimore.
On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Oppose? Roll call.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman to explain his vote.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and it's kind of strange to be up here where I agree with debate from both sides, but I just have to mention, and I have no problem talking about my county having experienced 2 out of the last 3 years of record homicide. So there's no doubt that crime has become a major issue throughout the entire state. I support the amendment because I do think we should have kept it exactly how it is, because the crime issue is unfortunately, again, spreading throughout all of our communities. So thank you, Madam Speaker.
Clerk will take the call. The amendment fails. Recognizing the minority leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have an amendment at the desk, 153725/1.
Amendment number 1.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would the floor leader rise with respect to this particular amendment? I believe it's my friend from Montgomery County.
I assume you want to say so much be considered.
So much be considered the reading of the amendment. I was going to slide that
So
in there.
ordered.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. So my understanding, those of us who would probably try to read this amendment on your floor system, it doesn't say very much, as many of these amendments do. It's gobbledygook on page whatever, strike this line, add that line, strike the line. It's hard to figure. But essentially what this amendment relates to is a fenced-off item of funding within the House's version of the budget bill that would provide $18 million contingently upon the passage of a Senate bill. And that Senate bill is, I believe, 528, which is referred to as sort of a climate change, or the climate change bill that we've all heard about that's coming over from the Senate. One thing, I'm not in the Senate, none of us are. I'm not intimately familiar with what the Senate did specifically to the bill, but I can read fairly well, and a lot of the news reports tend to indicate that the Senate bill 528 was substantially amended throughout their process. But I took a look at the fiscal and policy note, and the fiscal and policy note said that the estimated impact was $18 million, and that seems to be what we're still pushing for in the budget, is $18 million. So do you know if the Senate amendments to the substantive provisions of the bill changed the fiscal note or the fiscal outlook at all and may affect this $18 million?
Madam Speaker.
Floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yes, well, good morning, and thank you for sending the committee a copy of the amendment in advance, even though, as you said, it's pretty indecipherable when you just look at the amendment. The $18 million set aside here is for 4 specific purposes. I'm happy to go over what those 4 purposes
that would be great. Thank you.
Are with you. They are really not things that were subject to heavy amendments by the Senate. And frankly, I don't think they're the things that the minority party may find controversial about the Climate Solutions Now Act.
Know.
You never know. I just said I think. I'm not stipulating a fact, Counselor. First, $11 million is for the Net Zero School Fund. This is part of an effort in the Climate Solutions Now Act to encourage school districts to build at least one net zero school, to the extent they have to build new schools during the next decade or so. The purpose of this fund is to cover the difference, if there is a difference, and the Interagency Commission on School Construction suggested there actually may be no difference in the cost of building a sort of traditional school and a net zero school. $5 million is for the Climate Catalytic Capital Fund, which is usually more popularly referred to as the Green Bank. This is something the Maryland Clean Energy Center has been working with our friends in the Economic Matters Committee on for years to create sort of an investment vehicle for clean energy investments and opportunities. A number of other states have these types of banks and funds. $1.5 million for the Maryland Climate Justice Corps. This is to get young people involved in basically service projects that help both prevent and mitigate the impacts of climate change. And then $500,000 to bolster the Maryland Healthy Soils Program, which is a program that works with our state's farmers for more healthy soil opportunities. So that's what the $18 million does, set out very specifically in the budget amendment, and I hope that addresses your question.
Thank you. And so none of those things would have been affected by the amendments that the Senate did at this point in time. I know they did some things with respect to building standards and changing some of the percentages. These programs are all sort of set aside from that.
Yeah, so Ms. Leader, I can't promise you that there were no amendments to any of these 4 programs, but these 4 programs are largely intact from the time the bill was introduced till it passed. There were no substantial changes to these programs. These are not the programs that were the subject of a lot of the media reports.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the information. Madam Speaker and members of the House, even though you just heard the recitation of what those 4 programs are, we continue to believe that doing this, that funding these programs, it's a bill that hasn't passed, it's a bill we haven't seen, it's a bill that we don't know about, it's a bill that may have substantial amendments, and it's a bill, if you read the fiscal note, DLS, the independent experts that are supposed to advise us on these things, that said for most of the bill's provisions, a reliable estimate cannot be made at this time. Regardless, state expenditures increased significantly beginning in fiscal year 2023. And the fiscal note talks about new positions at MDE and Maryland Energy Administration and other departments across the board would have to be hired to implement this particular legislation. And I'm sure that the floor leader has given an accurate recitation of the committee's intent with what would be funded. But what I would suggest to you is, if someone comes back and says, we're not really sure that we'll need to spend any more money to build a net zero school, which he just indicated that I believe the Interagency Commission on School Construction has suggested, then why would we budget, I hope I'm getting this number right, $11 million. $11 million. I want each one of you thinking, as a representative of your own district, of your own community, how much you have to work here and how much you have to put in to get $11 million for a legislative priority or a capital priority, or regardless, Republican, Democrat, leadership, not leadership. $11 million is not an insignificant sum of money for those of us to come down here and get, but we're putting $11 million in. We may or may not need it. We haven't passed the bill yet. Just put it in there. When we pass the bill, it'll go in. Everyone agrees that there are things that we can do to combat the effects of what is viewed as climate change. Everyone agrees that there are things we can do. We strongly disagree about what necessarily we can do. Is it resiliency? Is it adopting and adapting to new conditions? Or is it basically radically re-altering our society and our economy in a pursuit to try to reach a number, a fictional global temperature number, that when we reach that, it will all be okay? If we reach this fictional number of what the global temperature really was, global temperature. I don't know what the temperature is in Nairobi, Kenya today. I don't know what the temperature is in Greenland. I don't know what the temperature is in Omaha, Nebraska. I know what the temperature is here. I don't know how all of that turns into global temperature. But what I would suggest is that in this particular amendment, we're again spending money, $18 million, that we don't necessarily need to spend. There may be a time where this money is intelligently spent, but it's not today, it's not before the bill was passed, it's not under the conditions of this budget, and we believe that voting for it is not being fiscally prudent at this time. Thank you, Madam Speaker. We move the amendment.
Madam Speaker.
The Chair of Environment and Transportation.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, I'm actually pretty familiar with the Senate bill that came over, and I'm very confident that we will, with our colleagues in the Economic Matters Committee, amend it to make it a better bill, and you will see it soon. But let's talk a little bit about net zero school. Even in a world where that bill were not to pass, this would be a good idea. And let me give you a specific example of why I say that. In Montgomery County, there was a geothermal project that was not green lighted because it would have cost, I think it would have cost an additional $200,000, and there were some other factors associated with it. But if it had gone forward, the program would have paid for itself in 7 years, and over the course of 30 years, this particular investment would have saved the Montgomery County public school system roughly $16 million. Now, I want you to think about that for a moment. If you're a person who doesn't think that global climate change is real, well, first, I'd recommend that you read a newspaper. But secondly, let's assume for the sake of argument that it's not real. Let's look at the numbers. Does it make sense to make investments in public school buildings that would pay for themselves in 7 years and maybe save $16 million over 30 years? Yeah, I think it would. And this kind of an investment, and it is, by the way, a true investment in the sense that you spend money today and you save money in the future. That's an actual investment. This kind of investment would make a great deal of sense even if we did not pass the Climate Solutions Bill, which, just my opinion, I'm confident that we will. And so, Madam Speaker, I would strongly urge the body to support the language that is in the appropriation, that the Appropriations Committee has put into the budget, and please reject this amendment.
Maker of the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If the chair of the Environmental Matters Committee tells me he's going to pass the bill, I believe him. I believe that he's going to pass a bill, some type of bill. Although last year the bill didn't get passed, but I believe that the bill will get passed. But what I would suggest is that if this is an important initiative, and I don't have a fundamental objection whatsoever to creating a better, more ecologically friendly, and particularly if it's saving money, school. I think that's common sense. That's great. All I'm suggesting is that if the experts with the experts in school construction are suggesting it may not even cost any more money, and also when we suggest, and I think we know as legislators, that there's lots and lots and lots of money for school construction, and there's lots and lots and lots of money for education writ large, public K through 12 education, that is flowing through our system. I hope that that's a good thing. I really do. I think that I hope that it works. I hope that money changes results. But at the end of the day, I don't know that we need to create another $11 million for projects that may or may not happen, that may or may not help, when we have probably lots of other pockets and lots of other envelopes in billions of dollars of funding that could be accessed for those purposes. This to me just seems like we're tacking a little bit more sugar on top of the ice cream that it's already good enough. And so that's why the amendment exists. It's not to suggest that we would be opposed in concept to some of these projects. It's to suggest that perhaps this vehicle, this funding in this way and at this time is perhaps unneeded, and we could save $11 million or more. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and certainly I defer to the chair of the committee on the substantive issues. We'll have that substantive debate. This is a debate about the budget, and so I'll give a little bit of Budget 101. This is what's called a contingency. We all the time have budget line items that are contingent on legislation passing. The first year the minority leader and I were here, we had contingent language on a charter school provision that the governor was interested in. Last year we had contingent language on funding an autism study or an autism work group program from my friend from Baltimore County across the way. We do this every year. In fact, when I look at the other items in what's called sort of the fenced off list, I see some ones that many members of this body probably support that are contingent on legislation. Letter number 11 involves a West Virginia Economic Future Investment Fund that may be of interest to certain members. So it's contingent on legislation that has not been on this floor. This is something we do in the budget. The other thing we do in the budget, just to lean into my budget nerd reputation, is this is what's called a fence, which means it'll be up to the governor whether or not to release this money. But this is how we do budgeting in the state of Maryland. If you want to have a substantive debate about how good or bad net zero schools are, how much they'll cost, we'll have that debate, it sounds like, based on the committee chair's views in the next few days. But for now, I'd ask the body to resist this amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Chair.
Maker of the amendment.
In closing, Madam Speaker, if I could maybe take that 11 million and pump the other line up back to the 20, the way the Senate left the Western Maryland thing, maybe I could withdraw the amendment. I'm just negotiating. But no, I appreciate what my friend is saying. I think this is simply a philosophical debate about putting money out there for things that may or may not be needed, that may or may not be targeted correctly at this time, or there may or may not be other sources for, and doing it right now through this particular budget as if it doesn't happen right now, we'll never be able to come back and address it. We just don't think it's fiscally prudent. With that, I would request we move the amendment.
On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Oppose? Roll call.
Madam Speaker.
Clerk will take the call. The amendment fails.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from the Eastern Shore.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have an amendment at the desk. Number is 293-720/1.
Amendment number 1.
So much to be considered, the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
Madam Speaker, this amendment is the proverbial don't put the cart before the horse. We have in this budget a $21 million appropriation that assumes that a Senate bill is going to pass and that we're going to fund that. Madam Speaker, before I was a twinkle in the eye of our prior Speaker Bush, before I was elected, he and Senate President Mike Miller created the report on the Maryland Economic Development and Business Climate Commission. It was a multi-year commission that went into detail on regulation policy and tax policy, major questions that honestly brought me into office. Regulations that were overly burdensome, poorly administered, taxation policy where we had the governor passing 40-some taxes on top of businesses and individuals, and it did require an action by this legislature for which, after the commission was passed, we made significant progress together with the Hogan administration. And for example, we changed from the Department of Economic Development, DBED, we created the Department of Commerce, a major policy change that required, in my opinion, a commission, an independent commission, to study it and to think about it. Our predecessor, your predecessor, Mike Bush, had to say this in 2014 when the commission was created. I need my glasses. I just took them off. This commission is critically important to map out the future growth of Maryland's economy. This panel of private sector leaders have state, national, and global experience in promoting business competitiveness, and I believe they will produce a blueprint for the next governor and the next legislature to guide our policy-making decisions to continue Maryland's economic and private sector growth and prosperity. Senate President Mike Miller had to say this about the creation of the commission. The competition for jobs and economic development is no longer limited to Maryland versus our sister states. It's going to be a global competition. We are asking for the expertise of these distinguished individuals because we don't want Maryland to merely compare favorably to other places in the world. We plan to be at the forefront of the innovation economy of the future. In this report, there are a couple points that I've made a number of years at business meetings to citizens, some of the conclusions that they made after passing this commission. And that is that Maryland had not nearly reached its potential and that it needed to improve its entrepreneurial ecosystem, the small businesses. The strongest message conveyed, and this is quoted in the commission, that there was a dissatisfaction with the attitude towards business from state and local government. Madam Speaker, this legislature and the Senate and the Hogan administration responded to this commission with the confidence of having the commission's independent recommendations to move forward, and they did it well, in my opinion. So here we have today in our budget $21 million of potential money. Granted, we have to pass a Senate bill that does something completely dramatic and game-changing for the Department of Labor. And it's doing it before we study it. Now, I voted against the bill that Economic Matters Committee passed, but in short, the Economic Matters Committee came to the conclusion that we must have a commission to study and understand family medical leave, how we make it actuarially sound, because it's insurance, and it puts taxpayers at risk if the assumptions are not accurate. And we also need to study in this commission how this is going to affect the business community and the state. So I'll give you a couple of examples of what's under current law that I believe a commission, not passing a bill with a $21 million appropriation, but what would this commission be looking at? For one, they'd be looking at how many different versions of leave are currently under law. And those are, in 2008, Subtitle 8 leave, Section 3-801. In 2014, we passed Subtitle 12, Parental Leave Act, Section 3-1202. In 2008, Subtitle 3, Day of Rest, Retail and Wholesale Establishments. In 2010, the Healthy Retail Employee Act for shift breaks. In 2018, Subtitle 13, Maryland Healthy Working Families Act. In 2019, Subtitle 14, Organ Donation Leave. For our state employees, annual leave 10 to 25 days annually, dependent upon seniority. Personal leave 6 days annually, 7 during a leap year. Compensatory leave earned by employees who do not receive overtime payments. Sick leave 15 days annually. Parental leave, up to 60 days of leave to care for a newborn child. COVID leave, 10 days annually. Leave bank, leave donation program, accident leave and temporary total disability, and holiday leave, 12 holidays annually, 13 during an election year. And so the commission that the House Economic Matters Committee passed, in my opinion, has some work to do. And I don't think it's going to be easy work to do. But before we appropriate $21 million, and for the next 2 or 3 minutes, I'll tell you how we intend on spending that $21 million, may I suggest, whether or not I agree with passing that bill or not, making it law and creating that mandate on employers and the state, perhaps we should study this first. So what happens if we not adopt the amendment that I'm bringing here today? Maryland's Department of Labor, and this assumes also that the Senate bill passes, but as the minority leader mentioned, I don't doubt the intentions when I see bills come to our committee. We're going to have that bill hearing today for the Senate cross-file that's going to demand this money be spent. And so what is it going to do? The Department of Labor, in order to implement and administer the program free of this commission, is going to have to, on their own, develop process for receipt and review of application benefits, for determining benefit eligibility, develop a complaint, investigation, and prosecution process for those who attempt to avoid or reduce their proper contribution amount, develop a complaint, an investigation, and prosecution process for those who attempt to obtain benefits that they are not eligible for, develop employer and employee outreach and education materials, develop a structure to calculate, collect, and monitor tax contributions from employers, develop a structure to calculate, collect, and monitor contributions from covered employees and self-employed individuals participating in the program, develop a system for reviewing private employee plans, employers who satisfy the requirements of the title through a private employer who are exempt from the requirements of the bill, adopt regulations necessary to carry out the title, and then comply with the reporting requirements specified in the bill. Madam Speaker, the Department of Labor will create a department of 400 employees when stood up. That is equal to the entirety of the unemployment insurance program for the state of Maryland. That is a massive growth and expansion of the Department of Labor's mission. I'll say it in midstream here. We should have a commission that studies this. We should not be appropriating dollars, even if they're potential dollars. We should say no to the Senate on their bill. This bill will impose a new wage tax, and revenues would be significant. Revenue from the wage tax could be $1.4 billion. That's a payroll tax. And if we adopt the Senate's bill, do you realize that they're going to require the employees to pay the majority of that tax? If we accept my amendment, we're saying no to the Senate, and we're also saying no, that we're not going to arbitrarily impose a payroll tax on the employees. That will not be the priority in policy making during the session before we have a commission that studied it. The bill would require the division to engage in extensive rulemaking, for which, at this point, without the commission, what does that rulemaking look like? How are they guided? There will be unforeseen challenges and risks, Madam Speaker. 2 other states have created family medical leave, Washington State and Oregon. And I believe it's important for me to at least describe one example, because it relates to doing this out of step and out of kilter for what we know is the right way to set policy. Washington State, which implemented paid family medical leave in 2019, began paying benefits in January 2020, and they have struggled with their fund solvency. Quote, projections for the paid family medical leave fund have been challenging as the program has only 2 years of data on benefit payments and revenues received. That is, in an insurance world, the actuarial study that the Economic Matters Committee is asking that the Commission work on. Washington State recently had to pump $350 million of general fund taxpayer dollars to shore up their program after reports of looming shortfalls. Madam Speaker, I don't stand here often when I see business regulation bills come through and say I support a business regulation bill, because I think the private sector can absolutely create benefit programs, work with employees, do it the right way, and that when we invite government to do this for us, it creates a series of unintended consequences. But Madam Speaker, if we're going to do it, what I'm asking you is to create clear, bright line paths to compliance with the law, make it workable. Businesses and the state government agencies want to comply with the law, but we have to understand what the law is, we have to understand what the obligations are, and we as legislators have the ability, whether we agree or disagree on whether we should have paid family medical leave, have the ability to bring each of our perspectives to that kind of bill in a future year after the commission has given us guidance. Without that, you do not give the business community or the state agencies that clear, bright line path to compliance. You will bring confusion, and I believe at the minimum we will have the same problem that we have, as my example, in Washington State. So, Madam Speaker, I'm going to, for the sake of this conversation,
Madam Speaker,
say that you today, during this general session, have the ability to do what your predecessor did, which is say we have major challenges and opportunities, and that to do that, we need a commission. And I would politely ask the legislative body to understand how important this particular amendment is, because it is a position statement. We don't want to impose a $1.6 billion tax without the study, and we don't want to put regulations in place that the Department of Labor can easily implement. They're difficult rulemakings and can't do that without the commission. Mr. Chairman of Economic Matters Committee, voted against the commission bill. I support that over not doing it. I support it over what it seems to be the cart before the horse strategy, which is throwing $21 million in the budget to do something that, frankly, we've not done near enough work to get to that point. Madam Speaker, I move the amendment.
Recognizing the floor leader.
thank you, Madam Speaker. It's quite a bit of argument there. Let me be much briefer. This is not a business regulation. This is a budget. And the gentleman from Montgomery County very ably, and I won't do it again, illustrated to you what a contingent appropriation is. That's what this is. It's a contingent appropriation. It's contingent on family and medical leave taking effect. And what is this $20 million going to do if it does take effect? It's going to basically support 100 employees of the Department of Labor that we're going to need to administer the program. So this amendment and this $20 million has nothing to do with the policy. Go ahead and vote against the policy. This assumes the policy takes effect, and if it does, whether or not you want the policy to work for your constituents. That's all this is. Urge a red vote.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Talbot.
These are the tracks. These are the tracks for the Senate bill. We're laying the tracks. This language creates the infrastructure for the Senate bill. Now, we haven't even debated the merits of the Senate bill. You heard all the problems from the amendment sponsor. Here's something else for everybody to think about in the body. Now, this moves forward. We heard a lot from the business perspective about the impacts and consequences. Think about the workers. How many men get a full paycheck? How many men don't get a full paycheck? Men. We're talking about garnishment, paycheck, wages, right? This policy is another tax on a paycheck, okay? Now, we've talked about men
Madam Speaker,
in this chamber.
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
No. We're going to talk about the underlying.
I'm just going to suggest that we
Yeah,
stay on the
fine.
amendment, not the underlying policy.
On the amendment.
All right, this amendment will strike this language from the bill. Okay, this language from the bill is going to grease the skids for the underlying bill, which is going to have a disparate impact on many men whose wages are already being garnished. It's a big issue. Think about it. Thank you.
On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Oppose? Roll call.
Madam Speaker,
Clerk will take the call. The amendment fails. Gentleman from Wycomico County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have an amendment at the desk. Amendment number 223521/1.
amendment number 1.
So much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So this amendment cuts $46.5 million from three separate, line items in there in the fencing for various purposes. And understand, it's not necessarily the content. Let me explain. There's $40 million in here for the Office of Business Development for the Cannabis Business Assistance Fund. And, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I looked at that and thought, okay. So if we pass this, if this passes and then passes referendum, we'll probably need this money to help bail out the medical cannabis dispensaries that'll flounder after that. And I thought we might need to help businesses that are affected from the lack of employees that could probably pass a drug test after we, pass this legislation. Now look at the next item, and it's $5 million for a program for family health and chronic disease services. And I'm thinking, okay, that makes sense because much like smoking, we know that there's health risks. So I'm thinking that this is going to help out with some kind of respiratory ailments and depression, anxiety, and other heart risk associated with smoking. So I'm thinking, okay, that makes sense. And then there's another $1.5 million for information technology that I won't touch on. I'll leave to our resident expert on the other side of the floor. But so all this together is the $46.5 million. And the common element in all these is everything is contingent and contingent. And some of these are not only contingent on a bill passing, but a referendum. So all I'm saying is this is a little premature. And as we heard earlier, we're putting the cart before the horse. Madam Speaker, I ask you to move the amendment.
Floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So colleagues, we already had one of our other colleagues talk about contingency legislation. This again is contingent upon legislation passing, as well as a constitutional amendment. And so there is still more to go. However, we want to be prepared should the legislation and the constitutional amendment pass. And we have measures in place to make sure that funding is available for what my colleague described earlier, which he may not have been familiar with all the intricacies of what those funds will go towards, but those funds would help individuals as well as businesses and alike that he talked about. Again, this is all contingency funding. And so without rehashing the debate about the legislation, I would just ask that you please reject the amendment.
The maker of the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. But the difference here, unlike some of the other contingencies we talked about, and as you mentioned, this has a contingency to pass the voters, so it's an extra step. So I ask the body to accept the amendment, and thank you.
On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Oppose? Roll call.
Madam Speaker,
Clerk will take the call. The amendment fails.
Madam Speaker,
Jump.
I'd like to change my vote on the last amendment from green to red. Thank you.
Change vote?
Yep.
Yes.
Madam Speaker, thank you. Amendment 433322. My button did not work. Please record me in the green. Thank you.
Gentleman from Frederick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have an amendment at the desk. It's Amendment 913826.
Amendment number 1.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this is a straightforward amendment to help our veterans. We have hundreds, if not thousands, of veterans right now in Maryland who many times are in pain with their joints, their skin, some of them without legs or arms, some of them others having PTSD needs. This is a simple approach to say to the Department of Veterans Affairs that we're going to allow complementary and alternative medical treatment, something that the NIH has recognized as being very highly effective for veterans, particularly in the context of this scourge of overdoses through opiates. This simply allows access to alternative treatments rather than medications. It allows for a combination of medical as well as naturopathic holistic approaches, and it has wide support in the veteran community, so I would move the amendment. Thank you.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, I would ask that you reject this amendment. This amendment actually takes funds from a pretty good project that provides benefits to our veterans already. And it's actually taken it to a program that we actually heard through a bill, where we had a number of questions about that bill and the actual, what the treatment goes towards, the implementation. And so there are still questions about the implementation of this program. However, there is a program that this money is actually taking money away from that does provide benefits to our veterans. And so I would just ask that you resist this amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Maker of the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This does not take money away from veterans. It actually just allows for $100,000 of the fund that exists to support our veterans to be used for complementary and alternative treatments. It's a straightforward approach. It is something that's widely requested in the veteran community, particularly those that are right here in Maryland that need alternative options to the, instead of just being placed on medications, offered opiates that are creating constant overdose. We're talking 22 veterans a day in America commit suicide. These are the best among us. We need to make sure that we have these options, and it just simply says to the Veterans Affairs Department to allow this program. That's all. So I move the amendment. Thank you.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to, at least on the amendment, one, there's a bill that's from the Senate now that's dealing with alternative medications and also practices of dealing with PTSD and depression. And also just want to point out that with my experience with the state VA, that's not what they're set up to do. That's also why we have a veteran-specific agency or department within the Department of Health that works with the state VA. So in terms of the amendment, I don't think it's going to do what the drafter believes, and the Department of Veterans Affairs isn't set up to deal with healthcare concerns. But if you were really going to do something, it would really need to look at the Department of Health. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Oppose? Roll call. We're not hitting. We got that. We're getting a little. Got it? Oh, yes. Push the.
Madam Speaker.
Yes. Had to hit it, Rose. Clerk will take the call. There being 91 votes, and the amendment fails.
Madam Speaker, I think I got slightly cut off a
Gentleman
moment
from
ago,
Baltimore
but
County.
I did want to change my vote. It's just, can I do it now?
Yes.
Okay. On Amendment 403620/1 from nay to yay. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Young lady from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Vote change. Senate Bill 290, Amendment 40362/1 to yes, please.
The gentleman from Frederick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have an amendment at the desk, Amendment 793823.
Amendment number 1.
Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a straightforward declaration of the intent of the General Assembly to do what we just did this week when we all voted unanimously to divest from Russian business contracts here in Maryland. This simply extends that to their largest ally in the atrocities that we're seeing. Simply says this, that it is the intent of the General Assembly of the State of Maryland to divest from all contracts or business with the Chinese government, the Communist Party of China, and the People's Liberation Army, and any business affiliated or owned in part or whole by any of the aforementioned. And I would say that this is a bipartisan approach. We know that there are significant financial contracts with the Chinese government, such that what could have been a great program with the University of Maryland, the Confucius Institute, because of Senator Ben Cardin and other speaking up at the fact that the Chinese government was actually funding it and limiting the measure of study, that program got canceled. But instead, we're still operating many different programs. There's, in fact, a department still within the University of Maryland with the Beijing Municipal Education Commission, funded wholly by the Chinese government. So with that, I'd move the amendment.
Floor Leader.
Madam Speaker, thank you. Body, I ask that we reject this amendment. We've already had this debate. We already voted on this issue. We do not divest through the budget. That's not how we do things. Please vote against this. Thank you.
On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Oppose? No. Roll call.
Madam Speaker.
Clerk will take the call. The amendment fails.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Frederick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have one final amendment at the desk. Amendment 133720.
Amendment number 1.
Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
Madam Speaker, we're at a time in our state where we're looking for unity. We need to come together as parties. We need to come together for our children. We need to look at ways that we can step aside from some of the vitriol and look instead to the greatness that this country offers, that our state offers. And when we look at the news, we can only see what the lack of a Bill of Rights does to the world. And yet here in our public schools in Maryland, we don't always ensure that our children understand our Constitution, and particularly our Maryland Constitution. There are wonderful protections that they have, and as we know, it's the highest law of the land. Instead, sometimes students aren't even familiar with the fact that they have the right to free speech, with the fact that they have a 14th Amendment right of due process. So this is a bipartisan attempt to ensure that that takes place. The amendment simply says this: it is the intent of the Maryland General Assembly to require teaching of the United States Constitution and the Maryland Constitution in all public schools. Madam Speaker, I move the amendment.
Madam Speaker.
Floor Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd ask the body to resist the amendment. Look, we don't generally prescribe curriculum. We know we've heard that from the Ways and Means Committee, and when we do it, there's a process. It goes to the committee. It gets a hearing. I mean, we could get rid of all the committees and just have the Appropriations Committee, but I think the chair and I would be okay with that. But I think in the meantime, maybe we should leave policy to the policy committees, leave the budget to the budget, and get yourself a bill. Thank you, Madam.
Maker of the amendment.
I don't think that we need to get ourselves a bill when we take an oath to these documents, Madam Speaker. And sadly, many of our students don't understand that this is the highest law of the land. This is not a curriculum. This is a very needed part of the budget that says, in the context of everything else, we're going to make sure that we teach equity, inclusion. We're going to make sure that we teach that the American principles that hold us together, that unite us, are something that our students are aware of and that are very familiar with. So with that, I move the amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Roll call.
Madam Speaker.
Clerk will take the call. The amendment fails. Recognizing Gentlelady from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Could the floor leader rise for a quick question? Over the official floor leader?
In terms of what? Oh.
On the bill.
Huh.
Yeah, thanks.
Chair of the committee.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Pardon me. Does this bill maintain the funding for our education per pupil at the pre-pandemic level?
No, it's increased by, I think, about 456, and we plan on moving another 800 million into the.
Oh yeah. So I mean, like, sort of how many students that are included? Has that been carried over? I know a lot of students in my area sort of have left the system. I'm just wondering if those students are still going to be receiving money for kids that are no longer attending.
The system, your school district will.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Any recognizing the minority whip.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just on the, I guess we're at the point where we're speaking on the bill. Just if I could, unless any of you all have other amendments. So let me just say, with regard to the budget, first of all, I think I would be remiss if I didn't commend my friend, the Chair of Appropriations, for the 30,000-foot view with which she has handled the budgetary process during my time in the House of Delegates, I got to tell you. And while she and I haven't agreed over some big ticket items over the years, like Kerwin, for instance, she has always tried to caution us, in my estimation, about spending decisions which have long-term implications. And frankly, she's always endeavored, in my estimation, to make sure that we could afford our debt and that we had adequate reserves so that we could keep our AAA bond rating. As a fiscal conservative, I certainly appreciate that. However, I am concerned about the explosion in state spending just during the time that I've been in the House. While some of you may think, I dropped my notes, that I've been here since Albert Ritchie was governor, this is actually only my 8th year down here. And just since I've been here, spending has ballooned from $39.9 billion in 2015 to roughly $58 billion in this budget, and that's almost a 70% increase in 8 years. So while I'm voting for the budget, I just want to make that clear. While I'm voting for the budget, I just wanted to express that concern. So thank you, Madam Speaker.
Chair of the committee, Appropriations Committee.
Thank you very much. And thanks for those wonderful comments. I will suggest to you that the budget we have before us is the governor of the state of Maryland's budget. And under the governor of the state of Maryland, we have seen an increase just in those 8 years, I believe, of, the lower 40s to well over $50 million. But let me just say this to our credit, to his credit also. We have gone through extraordinary times. Extraordinary times. And the current president and the past president of the United States and Congress sent us a lot of funding and resources to help us through those extraordinary times. That money is still flowing through this budget, and infrastructure money is yet to come. Get ready for another $6 billion to flow through this budget next year. We haven't raised taxes wholesale in the last 8 years, none of us. And we do hope that we will have in the next 2 weeks an opportunity to continue what the Ways and Means Committee has already begun, which is a reduction in taxes for people who need it the most in Maryland. But I will tell you that to look at this budget and to realize that we're going to fully fund the blueprint for Maryland's future for our kids, that we're going to pass dental health care, for kids in this state that need it the most, that we are setting up a framework for paid family leave, and that we're helping all of the providers in this state who work so hard during this pandemic for the ones who need it the most by giving them a 4% increase in their rates. To think that this budget is here and that we're going to vote on it, we ought to be proud of that. We ought to be proud of it. It is the governor's budget, and it's the last year we're going to see a process like this. Next year, those of you who return will have the ability to put more of an imprint on the budget of the state of Maryland. But we are fiscally responsible, AAA bond rating state. And we should be proud of this work product. So I proudly and hope that I can proudly ask all of you to vote green on the budget bill for 2023.
On the budget bill. Clerk will take the call.
Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, to explain my vote.
Explain your vote.
I thank the good lady from Baltimore City for the hard work that she's done on this and for the many years she's worked down here at the General Assembly. But back in my district, the money that's been cut away from veterans, the money that's been cut away from school choice, the money that's put in for indoctrination, the money that's put in for global warming, the money that's going to be there to make it tough on business owners and employees of those businesses, I have to vote no. And I have to say that the rate that the budget grows is uncontrollable, unsustainable, and more people, because of this budget, will leave the state of Maryland. So thank you for your hard work, and I'm sorry that I have to disagree, but I do disagree with this budget. Thank you.
Clerk will take the call. There being 113 in the affirmative, the Senate Bill 290, the budget bill for fiscal year 2023 is passed. Thank you for all the hard work that was done for several, primarily appropriations and some other factors as well. Message from the Senate. Senate bills introduced in the House. The clerk will read the bill on committee assignment.
Senate Bill 480, Senator Hester, House Rules. Senate Bill 760, Senator Hayes, House Rules. Bill Order Sylvia Seeger, Chief Clerk.
That ends work at the desk. Committee announcements. Any committee announcements? Health and Government Operations.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That committee will meet for a bill hearing at 1:30 today.
Judiciary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, ladies and gentlemen. The House Judiciary Committee will meet at 1 o'clock for a bill hearing followed by a voting session.
Environment and Transportation.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Environment and Transportation Committee will continue public bill hearings at 1 p.m.
Ways and Means.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Ways and Means Committee will continue public bill hearings at 1 p.m. today.
Economic Matters.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. House Economic Matters Committee will meet at 1 p.m. for bill hearings. Again, 1 p.m. for bill hearings.
Okay. Any other committee announcements? You have a committee announcement?
No, Madam Speaker, my button did not work. I would like to vote on Budget Bill SB 290, yay.
Any other announcements? Hearing none, quorum called before adjournment.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change a vote? Clerk will take the call. There being 127 members present, House is still in session, recognizing the majority leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that the House stand adjourned until Friday, March 25th at 11 a.m., Legislative Day, March 19th.